50 years after its initial release, Making Jaws remains a seminal experience for every single one of us, and 5 decades has done nothing.
In the world of Steven Spielberg, a legendary director whose work has shaped cinema, one film stands out not for its success, but for his personal regret. That film is Hook. Decades after the 1991 movie's release, new details have emerged about what happened behind the scenes, leaving many surprised. For years, there were rumors that Spielberg wasn't proud of the film, but the full story of why he now wishes he never made it is finally coming to light. The reason is surprising, and it raises even more questions about what went wrong and who the actress at the center of his regret was. Steven Spielberg's early life and background are key to understanding this. They say to understand a man, you must know where he came from. This is especially true for Spielberg, long before Hook became a source of regret. Born in Cincinnati, Ohio, in 1946, he was the oldest of 4 children in a Jewish family. His father was an electrical engineer and his mother a concert pianist, while his home was filled with music and science. Steven often felt like an outsider, shy, sensitive, and sometimes bullied. But the one place he felt at home was the movie theater, a place that would go on to shape his entire life. His constant presence at the theater as a young boy showed his love for movies. He was mesmerized by how stories could come to life, by the lights, the sounds, and the feeling of entering a new world. This passion led him to make his own changes. By the time he was 12, Spielberg was using his dad's old movie camera to make short films in his neighborhood. He directed his sisters, built sets out of cardboard, and created action scenes with toy soldiers. Making movies gave Steven a voice, a new side of himself his parents didn't fully understand but recognized as his passion. While other kids played sports, Spielberg was learning to tell stories with a camera. His journey wasn't easy. He was rejected from film school more than once. Some told him he didn't have what it takes, while others didn't take him seriously. But Spielberg didn't give up. He kept learning and filming, eventually getting his big break at just 21. Universal Studios offered him a contract after seeing his short film, Amblin, making him the youngest director ever to sign a long-term deal with a major studio. From there, his career took off. His first big hit was Jaws in 1975, which became the first true summer blockbuster. He followed it with other major successes like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and E.T. the Extraterrestrial. These were more than just popular movies. They were emotional, magical, and deeply meaningful. By the 1980s, Steven Spielberg had become a titan of Hollywood. People saw him as a genius who could turn a simple idea into something unforgettable. He was trusted with big budgets, and stars lined up to work with him. But with all that success came pressure. Spielberg wasn't just making movies, he was shaping culture. So when the idea for Hook came up in the late 1980s, it felt like a natural next step. It was a live-action version of Peter Pan with a twist. What if Peter grew up and forgot who he was? As a new father, Spielberg felt a personal connection to the story. Thinking about family, aging, and lost childhood dreams to achieve his vision for the movie. He assembled a dream cast: Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman, and Julia Roberts. The sets were magical, the costumes fantastical, and the story was meant to touch hearts. But after production, something was off. Spielberg admitted that Hook didn't feel like his movie. He felt emotionally distant, unable to connect with what he was creating. And to make things worse, he revealed that a woman in the cast was a central part of his dissatisfaction. So, who was she, and what did she do? On the surface, the production of Hook looked perfect. Spielberg had the story, the budget, and a star-studded cast. Robin Williams as Peter Pan, Dustin Hoffman as Captain Hook, and Julia Roberts as Tinkerbell. But behind the scenes, the peace and cooperation among the cast were falling apart. Tension on set became impossible to ignore. And one of the earliest signs of trouble came from Julia Roberts. Roberts was going through a difficult time in her personal life. Just before filming, she had a highly publicized breakup with actor Kiefer Sutherland, calling off their wedding days before it was supposed to happen. The media frenzy was intense, and Roberts arrived on set feeling emotionally drained and weighed down by pressure. This was her first big fantasy role, and instead of magic, things quickly turned into a mess. Crew members reportedly nicknamed her Tinker Hell because of her unpredictable behavior. According to reports, Roberts often isolated herself in her trailer, clashed with costume designers, and questioned the director's choices. She was always visibly upset and, as some claimed, not emotionally present for the role. This became a serious problem for Spielberg. While he's known for being calm and collaborative, directing Roberts proved to be one of his most stressful professional experiences. He later hinted in an interview that working with her was very difficult, a gentle way of describing a tense situation. The tension brought to the production didn't just affect Spielberg's personal mood. It spilled into the entire atmosphere of the set. The sense of wonder and creativity that usually drove his filmmaking began to fade. What should have been a joyful fantasy quickly became a draining, emotionally taxing process. Every day on set, which is a challenge, while other actors like Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman tried to maintain their energy. Roberts' instability made it difficult. Spielberg, who thrives on building strong bonds with his cast, found himself unable to connect with Roberts. There was no flow, no shared understanding, and for a director like Spielberg, who builds his best work on emotional connection, that disconnection was devastating. Reports suggested that Spielberg had to walk on eggshells around Roberts. Her mood was unpredictable, and simple scenes took much longer to shoot than they should have. For a massive film like Hook, where every minute cost thousands of dollars, this wasn't just frustrating. It was a danger to the entire production. Spielberg wasn't just dealing with an actress having a hard time. He was dealing with a film slowly losing its emotional core. Every scene that involved Tinkerbell was supposed to be filled with depth and warmth. But Roberts' performance often lacked these qualities. She was distant, distracted, and visibly stressed. Spielberg later admitted that the emotional tone he had envisioned never came through. This growing gap between what he hoped for and what was happening pushed him further into frustration. He started to feel like the film was slipping out of his hands. And his usual joy in the director's chair was replaced with exhaustion. Those close to the film said he seemed disconnected from Hook, like a man trying to finish a job, not tell a story, in later interviews. Spielberg chose his words carefully when discussing Roberts. He never directly blamed her, but he admitted that directing her during Hook was one of the most difficult challenges of his career. It wasn't about her talent, but about the timing. She was dealing with too much emotionally, and it affected her performance, her presence, and the overall mood on set. Behind the scenes, things got so tense that there were serious talks about whether Roberts could continue with the film. While she wasn't formally asked to leave, she was given time off to recover. The schedule was restructured, and she returned, but things were never the same. It became a struggle. Years later, after filming had long ended, Steven decided to open up about the movie. Why working with Roberts made him regret it, and what he learned. When Steven Spielberg started talking about Hook, it came as a shock. Not because the movie had failed, but because it had actually done well. Hook was a box office success, earning over $300 million worldwide. Fans loved its magical setting and characters, and the film even received Oscar nominations. On the surface, everything seemed to have gone right. So when Spielberg admitted he regretted making it, many people were surprised. Why would a director feel that way about a hit film? As it turned out, Spielberg's regret had little to do with how Hook was received. Instead, it came from how he felt during the making of the film. Years later, he revealed that he had struggled to connect emotionally to the story. What began as a passion project and a chance to tell a grown-up version of Peter Pan ended up feeling distant and draining. He explained that although the movie looked magical, it didn't feel magical to him while he was directing. One of the key reasons for this emotional distance was his experience directing Julia Roberts. In an interview, Spielberg made it clear that working with her had been challenging and that he would never work with her again. While he stopped short of directly criticizing her, His words suggested their relationship had been tense and difficult. For a director known for drawing deep emotional performances from his actors, this friction made the creative process far more complicated. Spielberg admitted that instead of feeling inspired by the cast, he approached Hook with a growing sense of obligation rather than passion. What had been an exciting opportunity gradually became a draining task. He described himself as being more focused on simply finishing the movie than connecting with it on an emotional level, the emotional spark that normally guided his storytelling process just wasn't there. He felt detached from the story he was telling. That realization didn't fade once filming ended. It stayed with him for years and became a source of personal regret. But the experience with Hook taught Spielberg something important. The emotional environment on set matters just as much as the script or the budget. If the energy is off and the team isn't connected, even a big, beautiful movie can feel empty. He realized that being a great director isn't just about vision, it's also about leadership, timing, and emotional trust. After Hook, Spielberg became more careful about the stories he chose and the people he worked with. He wanted to feel inspired. Again, he wanted his sets to be places where actors and crew felt safe and invested. In his mind, Hook was a reminder of what happens when that balance is lost. Even though the film was a success, Spielberg never looked back on it with joy. He didn't hate the movie, but he regretted the experience. It had worn him out in a way that few other films ever did. And a large part of that came from how hard it was to connect with Roberts during such an emotionally delicate time. It wasn't about her talent. It was about the way her personal struggles impacted the process. For Spielberg, Hook became a learning moment. It showed him the limits of star power, the dangers of disconnection, and the importance of emotional readiness, both for himself and for those around him. That quiet regret helped shape the way he directed from then on. And that shift showed up clearly in the films he made after. One of the biggest changes Spielberg made after Hook was choosing projects that meant more to him personally. He had always cared about emotion in film, but now he became more deliberate. He wanted to make sure every story came from a place of honesty, not just excitement or pressure. That new focus became clear with his next major film, Schindler's List in 1993. This was not a fantasy, but a powerful historical drama based on the true story of Oskar Schindler, a German businessman who saved over 1,000 Jews during the Holocaust. It was a deeply emotional film. Spielberg poured his heart into it, making Schindler's List was a completely different experience from Hook. Spielberg said he felt completely present during the process. The story was personal to him, not just as a director, but as a Jewish man who had grown up hearing stories about World War II. This time, the emotion was everywhere. The film won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. More importantly, it helped Spielberg reconnect with what he loved most about filmmaking: telling stories that matter. But the changes didn't stop there. Around the same time, Spielberg also directed Jurassic Park. On the surface, seemed like the kind of big technical movie that could have ended up like Hook. But this time, Spielberg made sure the story had a strong emotional core. He focused on the characters, their relationships, and the sense of wonder and danger they felt. The result was a thrilling movie that also had heart, and it became one of the most successful films in history. From there, when he made Lincoln in 2012, it became even more obvious how far Spielberg had come since Hook. This was not just a historical film. It was a deeply human story. Spielberg focused less on grand battles and more on quiet, powerful moments: a father grieving for his son, a leader torn between duty and morality. He worked closely with Daniel Day-Lewis, helping him bring emotion and depth to every scene. This time, there was no tension or disconnection. Spielberg was fully present, and so was his cast. The film won Academy Awards and earned critical praise. It proved that Spielberg had grown, that he was no longer chasing spectacle, but leading. With heart, even after Lincoln, Spielberg continued to grow. He followed it with deeply resonant films like Bridge of Spies, The Post, and The Fabelmans. Each one was marked by emotional honesty, rich character work, and thoughtful storytelling. These films proved that Spielberg had truly absorbed the lessons of Hook. He didn't just move past his regret. He transformed it into motivation. Rather than allowing one troubled production to define his career, he used it as a turning point to refine his approach. His later work shows a filmmaker more in tune with his actors, more patient with his process, and more grounded in emotion. Spielberg didn't try to cover up his disappointment with Hook. He acknowledged it, learned from it, and let it shape the director he would become. So, while he once admitted that he regretted making Hook, especially due to the challenges he faced with Julia Roberts, he ultimately showed the world something greater. He showed that one of the most powerful ways to fix a misstep is not to retreat from it, but to rise above it and create something more meaningful.